Hi, I'm Brian Fugate, a co-editor-in-chief with Barb Flynn and Mark Pagel for the Journal of Supply Chain Management. I want to encourage you to submit your research to our Emerging Discourse Incubator on research at the intersection of supply chain management and public policy and government regulation. First, if you're not familiar with JSCM's Emerging Discourse Incubator format, you can think about it like a special topics issue that's spread over 12 months. So this smooths out the flow of supply of submissions for our reviewers, and it enables a discourse throughout the year on the topic. So the topic for Emerging Discourse Incubator, or EDI, is again research at the intersection of supply chain management and public policy and government regulation. We want to spur research discussions with the major schools of thought in political economy that really haven't been explored much in our discipline. When you first hear about this topic, you may not think your research interest relates. But before you make that assumption, I'd like you to consider the following question. Does any of your current research or potential future research ideas deal with any of the following topics? So first, supply chain integration and collaboration. If so, think about the various antitrust and competition laws that impact those phenomena in that area. Do you conduct research in the transportation area? Well, if so, you're certainly aware of the safety and environmental policies and regulations impacting transportation today. International trade and tariffs? Enough said. Supply chain technologies and innovations such as drones, robots, artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning, and all the policies and regulations surrounding those areas. Food safety, transparency and traceability, data privacy and cybersecurity, environmental sustainability, healthcare supply chain management. Do you conduct research in the raw materials industries where there are often issues of conflict minerals and related geopolitical situations that affect those industries? Social sustainability and human rights, such as human trafficking, child labor, and many other areas in that space. Or is your phenomenon of interest impacted by state-owned enterprises or government-chartered corporations that influence supply chains and the managers that work in those supply chains? So if your interests relate to any of those areas, then I think that it could nicely fit into this call for papers. So let me explain. You see, each of those topics directly intersect with public policy and government regulations. But I think we simply haven't taken the efforts to make those connections. So for instance, each of these traditional supply chain phenomenon are influenced by or even influence the broader economic and socio-political institutional environment. And our research models on these topics, if we look at them broadly enough, most of the time would indeed include variables and constructs related to the institutional environment. We know that it impacts supply chains, but we often unintentionally or perhaps intentionally leave out those variables for various reasons, even when the data for such variables are available to us. And the studies that do include such variables tend to include them as controls, where we miss potentially valuable insights. And controlling for those variables certainly wouldn't be sufficient for this particular EDI. For this EDI, we want to encourage you to move those variables that help inform the intersection between supply chain and policy and regulation, move those closer to the forefront of the research models. Also consider the implication sections of our published articles. What are the targets of those implications most of the time? Well, most often we see theoretical implications and managerial implications. Those are obviously essential for research published in JSCM, but we'd like to start seeing implications for public policy and regulations as well. And again, I think often that it's simply that we haven't taken the time to consider those implications and put those implications in the research. So why do we think this EDI is so important? Well, look at the increase in regulations related to, for example, transparency, buyer-supplier antitrust, food and transportation safety, healthcare, international trade. All of this demonstrates the extent to which supply chain issues are no longer just business issues. More and more, they involve the convergence of business, economics, law, social policy, human rights, politics, and international relations, and many other areas. Worthy intentions are behind most policies and regulations, but the way in which they are developed and implemented may or may not be done with a scholarly understanding of the supply chain complexities. As supply chain scholars, we have the unique opportunity and perhaps responsibility to educate other decision makers about this area. So, the goal of this EDI is to encourage empirical, theory-based discourse about the intended and unintended consequences that happen at the intersection of supply chain management and public policy and government regulation. So I hope I've piqued your interest just enough that you'd like a few more details or examples. If so, I would like to encourage you to read the formal call for papers for this Emerging Discourse Incubator on our website, thejournalofsupplychainmanagement.com. In that call, you will see example descriptions of research opportunities that may spur ideas for you to consider for this EDI. A timeline for this EDI is also in that call, where you'll notice that we are accepting papers now. Then in January 2019, we're planning to post several invited papers from well-known scholars, both within and outside the supply chain discipline. So these invited papers will cover various topics with the intention to encourage greater discourse or spur even more ideas for you in this space. And notice that I said that we are accepting papers now, which means that as soon as you submit a paper, we will process your submission straight away, and if it is eventually accepted, it will be published soon after that time. Again, I would encourage you to read the call for papers on the journalofsupplychainmanagement.com. And if you have more questions after that, please do not hesitate to contact myself, Barbara Flynn, or Mark Pagel. Thank you, and we look forward to your submissions.